Tonight's presentation, although edited for YouTube, contains imagery and subject matter some may find disturbing. While our program is educational, we still feel that viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, and welcome to my channel. Since the very start of gaming, the idea of a possible Easter egg that causes misfortune or some sort of real-life stress has been very prevalent. In recent times, a lot of these urban legends or curses have been condensed into straight-up creepypastas. Today, I actually want to avoid those ones and focus on the more interesting and disturbing myths. So don't expect Polybius to be on this list, as it's been thoroughly debunked and memed on by the angry video game nerd. That said, I have found some fairly interesting items on here, done some of my own research, as well as found some shocking proof and extra updates to old urban legends you might have already heard of. So with that said, I am here with Daftpina, and these are 5 of the most disturbing video game myths around. But before I get into the actual list, today's video was made possible by Raid: Shadow Legends, which is available on both Apple and Android stores linked down below. Basically, it's a hero collector that has PvP, some cinematic looking boss fights, and an extensive pool of heroes to, well, collect. The thing that actually stood out to me the most was the 3D graphics this game employs, which actually looks not half bad for a mobile game. Usually I expect something more cartoony, but they actually went realistic with this one. I mean, hell, look at some of this stuff. The level of detail they actually have on some of these heroes is kind of impressive, and in my experience, it doesn't cause that much of an issue in the performance department. Oddly enough, I actually tried playing this game, and I've been doing so pretty casually for a while I wait for renders and have a minute at the office job. Honestly, if you want something to kill time, Raid: Shadow Legends is not a bad option for you to do that. And should you choose to use my link down below, get 50,000 silver immediately and a free champion as a part of the new player program. Getting in early will certainly give you a nice head start later down the line if you're interested. Raid also has a upcoming special launch event tournament with some pretty dope prizes that will help you with establishing yourself. With that said, the video was made possible by Raid: Shadow Legends, a game that you could get today by following the 3 links in the description and pinned in the comments down below. Now we're going to delve into the 5 of the most disturbing video gaming myths around.
The 90s had basketball. If there was any sport to define the decade, whether it be gaming or otherwise, then it'd be that. Or skateboarding. And let me say, that fad about tech decks was one that was so hard to escape during its heyday, but we aren't here to talk about fingerboards, since we're going to talk about some arcade leader boards. NBA Jam 1993 has a disturbing urban legend behind it, as unlike other basketball games, this one is supposedly haunted. Way back when, famous basketball star DRAZEN PETROVIC died sometime during the release due to a tragic car accident. But before the developers could change anything about the game, it already shipped. However, one night while game designer Mark Tamel was playing around in Mortal Kombat with a friend, the NBA coin-op machine next to them randomly started to call out, "Petrovic! Petrovic!" And this scared them, as Petrovic's team was not being played during the demo, and the announcer had zero reason to be calling out his name. Other reports of this started to appear, thus creating an urban legend. So the question at the end of the day would be, is the ghost of a former basketball star really haunting these arcade cabinets, or was this just a simple glitch that might be associated with this WAV file? In the end, it's likely a glitch, but that said, it's just one disturbing coincidence. But at the very least, it gets people talking and remembering DRAZEN PETROVIC to this day.
EARTHBOUND is a well-loved cult classic, and with Nintendo's penchant for banning anything remotely controversial and sexual in their early NES titles, it's hard to believe that a boss like Gygus got through. According to Shigesato Itoi, Gygus is based on a rape scene from the movie The Military Policeman and a Dismembered Beauty, which is why dialogue such as "it hurts" and "I feel good" is used in the fight itself. Don't get me wrong, it's extremely disturbing that something of this dark of an origin made it into a game ostensibly targeted at children. But according to this myth, Gygus himself is based on a fetus, and Ness is, well, aborting it. In general, the theory is rooted in the fact that this image looks very fetus-like. The inspiration behind Gygus itself, coupled with the fact that you travel up what looks like internal organs to even make it to the boss to begin with, led many to think that this myth could actually be plausible. EARTHBOUND is ostensibly about the loss of innocence, and how Ness, this young boy, is forced to grow up very fast as he deals with this cult based on the Aum Shinrikyo, which is a doomsday cult that stockpiled weapons and was responsible for a few gas attacks in Japan, which I covered pretty thoroughly in the Darkest Cult video, police violence, and then I think you get the picture. The fact that Gygus is directly inspired by a graphic adult film from Japan is just insane, but with that said, Gygus being a fetus and Ness aborting it, with that background, I could actually see this as being an actual possibility.
The game itself is nothing really special nowadays, but back in the 80s, this arcade cabinet had 30 voice samples included, and cost around $1,000 to produce, which made it very advanced for its time, but unfortunately because of this, Berserk is now gaming's oldest urban legend, and one rooted in a sad and comfortable truth. Before the 1980s, people did not see video games as something that could kill you, as it was just a fun thing you would do with a buddy at a bar or arcade. And I'm sure you've probably heard this song once in your life. That said, this perspective all changed as 3 tragic deaths occurred in the 1980s. First, we have Jeff Daly, who couldn't find much about, but apparently he suffered a heart attack after setting a high score on the Berserk cabinet. And when we take out the binary numbers, you see 666. Then we have Peter Petrovsky, who I can find information on. He had a pre-existing heart condition which was aggravated when the excitement from playing the game and achieving the high score caused him to have a fatal heart attack. Finally, a third death involving yet again the same machine involves Edward Clark and Pedro Roberts. At Friar Tuck's game room, over a dispute involving a quarter and the Berserk game cabinet, Edward Clark was stabbed to death in cold blood. Some people think that this is related to a myth involving Evil Otto, which is a mysterious ball-shaped entity that urges players to move from screen to screen. In reality, I think it's a coincidence. However, that said, this urban legend involving the deaths of 3 people who died tragically might have been the seed that eventually grew into the ESRB and the Mortal Kombat's games murder debate in Congress. It makes you think about how an idea, no matter how true, can have a massive lasting impact on the world as a whole.
Madden has been around forever, longer than me even. It's one of gaming's longest running sports franchises, but it's also host to one of the most uncomfortable urban legends to talk about. During its 25-year stay, 16 of Madden's cover athletes have had some sort of serious issue that led to an early season or a decline in their career. Out of the 21 total players that have had cover photos, that is an astonishing 76% of players who've had some sort of misfortune fall upon them after appearing on Madden. While, yes, we can chalk this up to coincidence, Still, this is one rather disturbing fact to consider if you're an athlete. When Rob Gronkowski, I'm hoping I pronounced that name right, appeared in Madden 2017, he missed the first 2 games of the 2016 season due to a lingering hamstring injury. In Madden NFL 25, Adrian Peterson suffered an aggravated foot injury which caused him more misfortune. Michael Vick, who was on the cover of Madden 04, fractured his right fibia, then proceeded to miss 11 games in a regular season. And finally, the biggest casualty so far was Peyton Hills of the Cleveland Browns. He was on the cover of Madden 12. Basically, he got strep throat and also pulled a hamstring. He was only able to do about half as well as he did in the previous season and then proceeded to get dropped by the Cleveland Browns, citing that they didn't want to meet his salary demands. He ended up doing 3 more seasons with Kansas City and the New York Giants, but still he got injured, then dropped from his team, and then physically could never perform as well as he did in 2010 after this. While I personally don't believe in the Madden curse, or any curse in general, it's hard to say that there's not something going on here. Whether you want to believe it's some sort of spectral happenings, karma from EA rubbing on those who choose to sign up with them, or just good old-fashioned stress ruining once great players, it's still one interesting, if not unsettling, urban legend to think about.
There are some very disturbing aspects to Hong Kong 97, but first and foremost, as the AVGN has stated, it's mostly known as a meme nowadays, hence why we're bringing it up as extra. That said, Hong Kong 97 is a 1995 unlicensed multi-directional shooter, which was made for the Super Famicom Disk Drive format by Happysoft Ltd. In the game, you play as Bruce Lee's relative and shoot people, which subsequently turn to mushroom clouds that apparently leaves behind a flashing image of a corpse. Speculation went rampant on who this person actually was, and it's rumored to be a picture of Leszek Blazinski, a Polish boxer who committed suicide on the day mentioned. And the only music in the game is a short loop of "Wo I Beijing Chinaman." If you've watched the AVGN episode about this, then you probably know everything I said up until this point. However, I have some new information. Yoshihisa Kurosawa, the man responsible for this game, stated that he made this as a joke to mock the state of the games industry in his country. And the person who programmed this game was actually a former member of Enix. Yes, that's Square Enix, was actually the person who made this. And you probably can't even tell, but this game was made entirely in just 2 days. I mean, the main character sprite was taken from a movie poster and the song was ripped from a laserdisc. I mean, quality control. The game itself was distributed through various local stores and even some underground video game magazines where he would personally copy the game onto a cartridge or floppy disk and just send it out to people. The game was an urban legend for a long time, and considering the uncomfortable upbeat music that is played with the use of human corpses in a low res digitation quality, it took a while for people to actually find out this rather disturbing piece actually existed. Yoshihisa unfortunately did not get out scot-free from this game, as the content itself actually features some pretty racist remarks in it.
A herd of fucking ugly reds?
Yoshihisa became aware of the overwhelming negative reception after individuals who watched the AVGN review found his Facebook and started to spam him with unwanted questions day in and day out, which led to this 2018 interview with South China Morning Post. Basically, this game was just a shitpost from the 80s that people were creeped out a bit for a while when it first got released, but now it's considered one of the worst games ever made, and now it's just a joke.
This is the reason why this list exists. I wanted to get this one out before I covered disturbing indie games, because honestly I've been getting way too many requests for what this game deserves. So I'd figured I'd give it its own list, put it to bed, and never talk about this project again. And speaking of that, before I actually get into the actual item itself, I want you guys to understand that just about every download I could find related to this title had some sort of virus attached to it, and some versions are rumored to contain actual child porn, which is just horrible. Absolutely fucking horrible. And finally, all evidence points to this game being made by Obscure Horror Corner. Yes, I know he claims that a anonymous subscriber contacted him and he downloaded it based off of that, but I refuse to believe that for some reasons I'm going to get into later. The whole situation just screams creepypasta. I am willing to believe that others took his game and modified it later down the line, but I believe he made the initial version, the one that contains the extremely illicit material that you hear around the internet. With that out of the way, there's no more pushing this back. Let's dig into this in full. The audio in Sad Satan leans heavily on recordings of interviews of various murderers such as Charles Manson. The game also plays those sound clips with distortion effects on them, or in reverse. It does the same thing with music. And speaking of music, one of the songs played in this game is Wo Ai Beijing Tenement. When you listen to it on its own, you may think it's creepy, but I know it as that meme song from Hong Kong 97. You know, the game that's been around and considered a meme since the better part of a decade before Sad Satan was even made. Yes, the audio is absolutely unsettling and disturbing to listen to. Each step taken is loud, and the distorted sounds of people screaming can be heard in gruesome detail. To make everything worse, this game also makes use of binaural audio, which some research shows can induce feelings of nausea and discomfort. I am almost positive that this was not made as a way to distribute illegal illicit material, although some versions of this game are certainly doing that. Sad Satan, in its uncensored form, is nothing more than a walking simulator that has random images of gore and human death popping up, as well as images containing minors in unsettling situations. Some of the most notable images includes a mutilated child, a person who had their head hacked off, a bunch of children surrounding a Santa-like character, and finally a person who had their head crushed by a truck. Don't worry, all the reference images you're seeing now are not anything from the actual game, but rather stuff I recreated with my artist using vague descriptions. That way I can at least be a little bit respectful to those who died. As the story goes, Obscure Horror Corner was sent this game by a fan/subscriber. He then documented his playthrough on YouTube, which created the interest surrounding the game today. The problem is, and the one that most people notice, is the version that Obscure Horror Corner got his hands on is different from every version available online. Once upon a time, Obscure Horror Corner provided the .onion address, but it contained invalid characters, which made it impossible to download the game. He then appeared on Kotaku saying that the link was purposely given in error since the game itself did in fact contain graphic material, and the channel owner didn't want to be responsible for sending that out. I don't know about you, but this sounds like an ARG. A mysterious game shows up and it's so horrifying that this one dipshit on YouTube is the only guy who can guide you through it. A guy who has not shown his face or even talks in his videos. And provides interviews only to major news sources when speculation on his subreddit starts to die down and now wants to protect you from the most disturbing parts of the internet. Sorry if I'm skeptical, but this reeks of bullshit. Before this update was made on Kotaku, a person claiming to be the original fan who sent Obscure Horror Corner the game made an update stating, Obscure wasn't showing you the true version of the game. There was also a download link to a version of the game that contained graphic depictions of gore and CP. After being subjected to this, another version of the game with the pornography removed was created by the Redditors and dubbed the clean version. This was made in an attempt to infobomb the internet essentially. People who look up the clone version of Obscure Horror Corner's game will now be inundated with versions of Sad Satan that have no actual problems with it other than, I believe, gory images. And as far as I've researched, this has worked so far. The clone version, which appeared right after the interview mentioned above, had a nasty virus in it that made your PC a part of some botnet apparently. I'm not sure, but I am positive this is why he made this game. There are also a few alternate versions that have various files added or removed, which you can find with a simple Google search. Most of these are actually clean enough for regular Google indexing, if not extremely disturbing nonetheless. I mean, an individual with a very small subscriber base hiding a virus in an ARG and then distributing that right after having an interview with one of gaming's largest news sources, because the original link, which he didn't need to give in the first place, was a misdirection to save you from horrible illegal content, just seems a little too convenient for my wheelhouse. He captivated a lot of people with those ominous, disturbing videos, and then capitalized on this after his interview with the creation of his own botnet. The fact that the file had a virus only made it more creepy, mysterious, and interesting in many people's eyes, and this basically promotes itself, so long as you keep your mouth shut about your true intentions. Listen, I know a genre of content known as Ryona exists for people who like gore and violence for, those reasons, but this is not that. This is not what pedophiles do in their spare time, so take off your tinfoil hats. This is something a sick individual created in order to generate edgy shock value or some even deeper, more nefarious purpose. And he did this no matter who got hurt or humiliated or exploited in the process. I want to say don't look for this game, but a lot of people already fucking did, and it didn't fucking work. I'm not saying don't look for this game because it's scary and it'll make you vomit. I mean, it might. It uses binaural audio, but because there's no value here. Horror can be used to convey a lot of feelings, and I fucking stand by that. It can be used to make an actual statement. Sad Satan is nothing more than the exploitation of human death and childhood innocence. If you're looking for a disturbing experience, my next video on disturbing indie games will give you plenty of fodder and suggestions, and even my previous 2 videos on disturbing games have better examples than this game ever could hope to be. And at least they don't exploit children for a cheap thrill. If you want an ARG-like experience, well then, why don't you look at Petscop, because it contains an actual story, subtext, meaning, and, you know, deeper themes. It goes the extra mile to make the game look like something that could actually exist within the confines of its own story. While it's slowly delivering an entertaining story that is completely up for interpretation, we are left here waiting and biting and here to digest its inner meaning. Instead of just being edgy and relying on shock value with some story about protecting you from the bullshit pedophile network, Petscop actually presents an interesting tale. Here we are. I covered Sad Satan. You guys fucking happy? I gave my opinion. Now that I have, can we please just let this goddamn piece of shit of a game fucking rot?